I joined the army, but my superior lieutenant wanted me in his room for something I never expected. When I enlisted, I thought the hardest battles would be on the training field. I never imagined my greatest struggle would be with feelings I couldn't control. Lieutenant Harris had a presence that drew everyone's respect, and my attention in ways I couldn't explain. Every glance, every command stayed with me longer than it should have. One night, he stopped me and said quietly, "Private, come to my room tonight. We need to talk." My heart pounded. Talk about what? Discipline? Or something else? Standing outside his door, I knew nothing in my life would be the same once I stepped inside. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now, because what happened next is something you won't believe. The first weeks in the army were supposed to break me down, strip away everything I thought I knew about myself and rebuild me into a soldier. That's what they told us on day one, standing in neat lines, boots hitting the ground in perfect rhythm. And it worked. The endless drills, the shouting, the sweat that stung my eyes until I couldn't tell if it was tears or just exhaustion, all of it pushed me further than I ever imagined. But while everyone else seemed to focus on surviving the training, I found myself distracted by something else, someone else. Lieutenant Harris. He wasn't just another officer. He was the kind of man whose presence filled every space he entered. Broad shoulders under his pressed uniform, dark hair trimmed sharp, eyes that could slice through excuses like knives. He carried himself with calm authority, never raising his voice unless it mattered, and somehow, that made people fear him more. For me, it wasn't fear. It was fascination. I'd catch myself studying the way he stood with his arms folded, or how his jaw flexed when he gave an order. At first, I told myself it was admiration. Every soldier needs a role model, right? But it went beyond that. My chest tightened when his gaze brushed past me. My pulse jumped when his hand rested briefly on my shoulder during drills. And at night, lying on the hard barack cot, I'd close my eyes and replay those moments until sleep finally took me. The army taught discipline, but it didn't teach how to silence what was inside me. I fought harder than anyone during training, hoping that if I poured enough energy into the exercises, I'd sweat these feelings out. But they stayed. They grew. And then, the moment that changed everything happened. It was late, the sun already sinking behind the training grounds. Most of the men had been dismissed, their laughter echoing as they walked back to the barracks. I lingered, struggling with the final repetitions of a push-up set, determined not to quit. That's when his shadow fell across me. "Private," he said, his voice steady, carrying that weight it always did. "That's enough. Get up." I obeyed, breath ragged, sweat dripping down my face. I stood at attention, trying not to meet his eyes, because I knew if I did, something inside me would betray me. He studied me for a moment, then leaned just slightly closer. "Come to my room tonight," he said, quiet enough that no one else could hear. "We need to talk." Just one word, but it felt like a grenade had gone off inside me. What did he mean by talk? Did he notice the way I looked at him? Had I crossed some invisible line? Or was it something else? All the way back to the barracks, my thoughts spiraled. The guys joked, shoved each other, complained about sore muscles, but I barely heard them. My mind was on one thing only. Why did he want me in his room? By the time night fell, my nerves were raw. I paced the narrow space between bunks, my boots scuffing the floor, until finally one of the guys snapped, "What's your problem, man? Sit down." But I couldn't. I couldn't stop imagining it. His voice. His eyes. The unknown waiting behind that door. When the barracks finally quieted, I slipped out. The cool night air hit my face, sharp and grounding, but it didn't steady my heartbeat. My boots crunched softly on the gravel path toward the officers' quarters. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was carrying the weight of every possibility in my chest. When I reached his door, I froze. My hand hovered just inches from the wood. I could turn around right then. Go back. Pretend this never happened. But something stronger pulled me forward. I knocked. Twice. The door opened almost instantly, as if he had been waiting. Harris stood there, not in uniform this time, but in a plain gray t-shirt and dark pants. His posture was relaxed, yet his eyes carried that same piercing intensity. "Come in," he said. I stepped across the threshold, the door clicking shut behind me, sealing me in a space I had no idea how to navigate. The room was simple: a bed, a desk stacked with neatly arranged papers, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. But none of it mattered, because he was standing so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence pressed down heavier than any weight I'd lifted in training. I tried to breathe steady, but it came out shallow, uneven. Finally, he said, low and deliberate, "I've been watching you." My heart slammed against my ribs. Watching me? My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. His eyes locked on mine, searching, measuring. Then, almost imperceptibly, his expression softened. "There's something you need to know," he added, his voice even quieter now. I didn't dare move, didn't dare speak. The air between us thickened, filled with every unspoken question I was too afraid to ask. And then, just as I thought he might tell me everything, he took a step closer, so close I could feel his breath against my face. That's when I realized, whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. He stood there, inches away, and I swear I could feel the weight of his stare pressing into me more than any drill sergeant's command ever had. My chest rose and fell too fast, and I wondered if he could hear how loud my heart was beating in the silence of that room. "I've been watching you," he repeated, this time slower, like he wanted every word to sink into me. I forced myself to swallow, to push out some kind of reply, but all that came out was a broken, "Sir?" Harris's jaw tightened. He turned away briefly, running a hand over the desk as if buying himself a second to gather his thoughts. When he finally faced me again, his eyes had a different intensity, one that wasn't purely military. "You push harder than most of the men. You don't quit. Even when you're on the edge of breaking, you keep going. That's not something I ignore." His praise should have made me proud, but it only fueled the confusion burning inside me. Was this really about performance? Or was there something more hidden under his words? I nodded stiffly. "Thank you, Lieutenant." He studied me again, his gaze tracing me in a way that felt too long to be professional. I wanted to step back, to escape that tension building in the room, but my body wouldn't move. It was like I was rooted to the floor, waiting for him to say something that would finally make sense of this storm. "You remind me of myself," he said finally, voice lower now. "When I was your age, I didn't know where to put all that energy. The frustration. The hunger to prove myself." His pause hung heavy. "And sometimes, I didn't know what to do with feelings I wasn't supposed to have." My stomach dropped. The air between us shifted instantly, and every thought in my head collided at once. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Or was I twisting his words into what I wanted them to mean? I forced myself to ask, though my voice came out rough. "What do you mean by that, sir?" Instead of answering directly, he stepped closer. My body tensed. His hand hovered for a second, then landed gently on my shoulder. It was such a simple touch, yet it lit me up like electricity sparking across wires. "You already know," he said softly. The room spun. My training had prepared me for combat, for orders, for obedience, but not for this. Not for my commanding officer confessing in his own way that maybe he was as conflicted as I was. I should have pulled away. I should have put a wall back up, saluted, and left. But instead, I whispered, "I don't know if I can handle this." His hand didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on mine. "You don't have to handle it," he said, voice even quieter now. "You just have to be honest." The silence that followed was unbearable. My mind screamed with warnings. The consequences, the risk, the absolute chaos this could unleash if anyone found out. Yet none of that mattered in the moment. The only thing I could hear was his breath. The only thing I could feel was his hand on me. Then came the knock. But jarring. Both of us froze. "Lieutenant Harris?" a voice called from the hallway. It was another officer. "Captain needs you in the command tent. Now." Harris's hand snapped back like I was fire. His jaw clenched, frustration flashing across his face. He cleared his throat, his voice switching back to its usual commanding tone. "I'll be there in a moment." The footsteps faded, leaving us in heavy silence once again. He looked at me, his eyes holding something fierce. "This conversation isn't over." Before I could respond, he moved past me, opened the door, and stepped into the night like nothing had happened. I stood there alone in his quarters, my mind racing so violently I felt dizzy. He hadn't said the words outright, but the implication was there. The look in his eyes, the touch on my shoulder, the unfinished confession, it all pointed to something real, something I wasn't imagining. When I finally stumbled back to the barracks, the others were already asleep. I lay down on my cot, staring at the ceiling, my body buzzing with restless energy. I tried to replay every second, every word, searching for certainty. Did he mean what I thought he meant? Or had I just been desperate to hear something that wasn't there? I turned onto my side, eyes closing, but all I saw was his face inches from mine. All I heard was his voice saying, "You just have to be honest." But honest about what? About the fact that I wanted him in ways that terrified me? About how much of myself I'd been denying since the day I first noticed the way his presence consumed me. Sleep never came that night. By the time the bugle sounded in the early morning, my body was exhausted, but my mind was sharper than ever. I wasn't imagining this anymore. Something was happening. Something between us. The problem was, I didn't know what it meant or what it would cost. When I lined up for roll call, I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting to him. He stood tall at the front, uniform crisp again, voice commanding as if last night had never happened. For everyone else, it was just another morning. For me, it was the start of a battle I had no idea how to fight. And then, as the men dispersed for drills, his eyes found mine. Just for a second. But that second was enough. His stare lingered longer than it should have, and in that silent exchange, he told me everything, and nothing. The day dragged on with endless exercises, but I barely registered any of it. My body moved on autopilot. My mind was elsewhere. On him. On his words. On that knock at the door that had shattered the moment before it could become something more. And all I could think was, if no one had interrupted us, what would he have done? What would I have done? The question haunted me through every drill, every meal, every glance in his direction. It burned so hot that by the time night came again, I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this to myself. Because the truth was undeniable now. He wanted me to be honest. And maybe, just maybe, so did he. The next day began like any other, boots pounding the dirt in unison, rifles clutched tight, sweat dripping down our brows as the sun rose higher. To everyone else, it was just another day of drills. But for me, every movement felt mechanical, every order a blur. My mind wasn't on the training field. It was stuck in that room, replaying every second, every word, every look from Harris. The more I tried to bury it, the more it consumed me. His voice echoed in my head, "You just have to be honest." Honest about what? About how my body reacted every time he brushed past me. About the way my chest tightened when he singled me out. By midday, I couldn't take it anymore. During a short water break, I caught him scanning the men, eyes sharp as always. For just a second, his gaze landed on me, steady, deliberate. It wasn't like before when I wondered if I was imagining things. This time, it was clear. He knew. And he wanted me to know he knew. The hours crawled until evening, and when the drills finally ended, I didn't rush back to the barracks with the others. I lingered by the edge of the field, watching him dismiss the last group of recruits. He glanced at me once more before turning away toward the officers' quarters. My legs carried me after him before I even decided. I caught up just as he was climbing the steps. My voice came out more desperate than I intended. "Lieutenant." He turned, expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. Maybe he would shut me down, remind me of the rank between us, the rules we both knew too well. But instead, he tilted his head slightly as if to say, "Go on." I swallowed hard. "About last night?" The corner of his jaw flexed. "Not here," he said in a low tone. He didn't wait for my answer, just pushed open the door and stepped inside. I hesitated only a second before following. Once again, the door clicked shut behind me, shutting out the world. He didn't sit. Didn't relax. He stood close, his arms crossed over his chest, eyes locked on mine like he was studying every flicker of doubt on my face. "You want answers?" he said simply. I nodded. "I need to know what this is." His gaze dropped briefly, then returned to me with an intensity that made my throat go dry. "It's complicated." Complicated. The word almost made me laugh. That was the understatement of the century. This wasn't just complicated. It was dangerous. Forbidden. But none of that stopped the heat building between us. I stepped closer without even realizing it. "Then tell me the truth." For the first time since I'd known him, his eyes softened, just slightly, but enough for me to see the man beneath the uniform. "The truth," he said quietly, "is that I've tried to fight this longer than you can imagine." My breath caught. So I wasn't imagining it? No, his voice was firm now. "You weren't." The air thickened. His admission should have terrified me, but instead, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Still, the reality of it pressed down hard. "What do we do with that?" I asked. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "We do nothing. Because we can't. Not here. Not now." But the way he said it, the hesitation in his tone, told me he didn't believe his own words. I moved closer, close enough that I could feel the tension radiating off him. My voice dropped. "And if I don't want to do nothing?" His eyes flickered, first to the door, then back to me. His control was slipping. I could see it in the way his fists clenched, in the way his chest rose and fell faster. And then it happened. His hand brushed against mine, barely a touch, but it was enough to set my entire body on fire. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. "You don't understand what you're asking for," he said, his tone breaking for the first time, rough around the edges. "If anyone finds out." "I don't care," I cut in, surprising even myself with the force of my words. "I don't care what it costs." His eyes searched mine like he was looking for doubt, for hesitation. But there was none left. I had already stepped over the line the second I knocked on his door last night. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my face. "You should care," he whispered. "Because once this starts, there's no going back." The air between us was electric, the silence louder than any drill sergeant's yell. My heart hammered, but I didn't move. I didn't break the stare. And just when I thought he was going to close the distance, the building shook. A sudden blast ripped through the night, a dull roar followed by shouts outside. The window rattled, and both of us spun toward the sound. Alarms blared. Voices shouted orders. Somewhere in the distance, smoke began to rise. Harris's jaw set instantly. In a split second, he transformed back into the officer, the soldier, the man in command. "Stay here," he ordered, already reaching for his gear. But I couldn't. My body moved before I could think. "I'm coming with you." He shot me a look, part warning, part something else. Then, after a tense beat, he nodded once. "Fine. Stay close." We rushed out the door together, the night alive with chaos, soldiers running, alarms ringing, the acrid scent of fire filling the air. Whatever had just happened between us was shoved aside, replaced by something bigger, something dangerous. But as we sprinted into the smoke, one thought pulsed louder than the alarms. We had been on the edge of something unstoppable, and now, fate itself had torn it open before either of us could decide what it meant. The blast ripped the night apart, scattering every thought I had about Harris and me into 1,000 pieces. Smoke drifted over the camp, and shouts echoed in the distance. Soldiers poured out of the barracks, some half-dressed, scrambling to respond to whatever had just hit us. Beside me, Harris snapped into command like a switch had been thrown. His voice cut through the chaos. "Fall in. Gear up. Move, move, move." He barked orders with the same sharp authority I'd seen every day, but this time it carried an urgency that left no room for hesitation. I struggled to keep up. My hands fumbled as I grabbed my rifle, my boots pounding against the dirt as Harris led the charge toward the smoke. The acrid sting burned my throat, and the orange glow of fire flickered in the distance. My chest was tight, not just from fear, but from the whiplash of what had almost happened between us moments earlier. As we neared the source of the explosion, the scene came into view, One of the supply trucks was engulfed in flames, crates scattered, men running with buckets of water and extinguishers. It wasn't an attack, not from the outside. It looked like an accident, maybe a fuel leak, maybe something worse. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The fire was spreading fast, threatening to reach the ammunition stored nearby. "Get those crates out of there," Harris shouted. "Form a line, move them one by one." I didn't hesitate. I dropped into place, heaving heavy wooden boxes from the edge of the flames to waiting hands. My arms burned, lungs seared, but adrenaline kept me moving. Around me, the others did the same, sweat dripping, eyes wide with fear. If the fire reached the ammo, none of us would make it out alive. At one point, a soldier stumbled, nearly dropping a crate back into the blaze. I lunged forward, catching it just in time, my hands scorching from the heat. Harris was there instantly, steadying the box with me, his arm brushing mine. For a split second, his eyes met mine through the haze, a flash of something more than command, more than survival. Then he jerked his head toward safety. "Go!" We carried it together, dropping it into the growing stack farther back. By the time the flames were finally beaten down, my body was trembling, clothes soaked in sweat, hands raw. My chest heaved as I bent over, trying to catch my breath. The camp buzzed with voices, officers giving reports, medics checking on men who had inhaled too much smoke. But my focus was on Harris. He stood a few feet away, his shirt streaked with soot, jaw tight as he spoke with another officer. Even now, even after everything, my eyes followed him. When his gaze flicked back to me, it lingered. Not long, but long enough. Later, when order was restored and men began filing back to the barracks, Harris caught my arm. "Stay." His voice was quiet but firm. We waited until the last of the soldiers disappeared, until the night calmed to little more than smoldering embers and distant murmurs. Then, finally, we were alone again. "You could have been killed tonight," he said, stepping closer, his tone sharper than I expected. "So could you?" I shot back, more defiant than I intended. His eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in something closer to fear. "You don't get it. You can't throw yourself into danger like that." I let out a bitter laugh. "That's what the army is, isn't it? Throwing yourself into danger?" He shook his head. "Not like that. Not for me." The words hung between us, heavy, undeniable. I stared at him, my throat tight. "So I was right," I said quietly. "This isn't just me." For the first time, he didn't look away. "No," he admitted, voice low. "It's not just you." The world tilted beneath me. I'd imagined it, replayed it, doubted it 100 times, but hearing him confirm it shattered everything I thought I knew. "Then why keep fighting it?" I asked, my voice barely steady. His hands clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling hard. "Because this can destroy us both." "You think I don't want to?" He cut himself off, turning away, dragging a hand through his hair. "I can't say it." "You already did," I whispered. The silence pressed down again, thicker than the smoke still lingering in the air. I stepped closer, so close I could see the flecks of gray at his temples, the exhaustion etched into his features. "I don't care about the rules. I don't care about the risk. I just need to know where you stand." His eyes locked onto mine, and for once, there was no shield, no officer's mask. Just a man, caught between duty and desire. He opened his mouth, like he was finally going to let it spill, the truth, all of it. But before he could, another voice cut through the night. "Lieutenant Harris." We both stiffened. A soldier jogged up, saluting quickly. "Captain's asking for you again, sir. They want a full report on the fire." Harris's jaw clenched, his gaze flicking between the soldier and me. For a moment, I thought he might say it anyway, consequences be damned. But instead, he straightened, slipping the mask back into place. "Tell the captain I'll be there in 5. The soldier nodded and ran off. Harris turned back to me, his face unreadable now. "This isn't over," he said firmly. Then he left me standing there, the weight of his words pressing heavier than the smoke still hanging in the air. I stared after him, my mind spiraling. He'd admitted it, that it wasn't just me, that he felt it too. But once again the army, the world, had pulled him away before he could say more. As I walked back to the barracks alone, one thought kept repeating, louder than the chaos of the night. I had the answer I'd been searching for, but it was only half the truth. And the other half was still locked inside him, waiting for the moment he'd finally let it out. The camp returned to order in the days after the fire, but nothing inside me felt orderly anymore. Harris kept his distance in public, his voice clipped and professional, his posture unshakable. To everyone else, he was the same lieutenant he had always been. To me, every glance we exchanged carried the weight of everything left unsaid. I couldn't take it any longer. The silence. The tension. The endless pretending. So one night after lights out, I slipped from my cot and made my way toward his quarters. My fist hovered at the door for a moment before I knocked. It opened almost immediately, like he had been waiting. Harris stood there, expression hard, but his eyes betrayed him. He stepped aside without a word, and I entered. The door closed. The room was quiet. The world shrank until it was just him and me again. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, voice low. "I had to be," I answered. "I can't keep acting like this is nothing. I can't keep pretending." His jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he would send me away again. But then he exhaled sharply, running a hand across his face. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't lie awake every night fighting myself? Then stop fighting," I said, stepping closer. My voice shook, but my resolve didn't. "For once, just be honest. With me. With yourself." He looked at me, and in that gaze, I saw every wall he had built over the years, every rule, every fear. And slowly I saw them crumble. His hand reached for mine. Strong, steady, trembling only slightly as his fingers closed around me. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, softer than I'd ever heard him. "You don't have to know," I whispered. "We'll figure it out." The distance between us collapsed. His lips met mine, firm at first, almost cautious, then deeper, as if every barrier finally shattered. It wasn't reckless, wasn't wild. It was raw, desperate, and painfully real. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "If anyone finds out." "They won't," I said. "And if they do, I don't care." He gave a small, incredulous laugh. "You should care. But God help me, I believe you." We stood there in the quiet, holding on to each other like the world outside didn't exist. For the first time since I had enlisted, I felt free, not because of the uniform, not because of the discipline, but because I had finally stopped running from myself. And as he pulled me closer, I realized something I had been afraid to admit until now. I wasn't just falling for my superior. I was learning what it meant to be brave, not on the battlefield, but in my own skin. This was dangerous, complicated, maybe even doomed. But in that moment, I didn't care. All that mattered was that, for once, we had stopped pretending. The army would keep moving, drills would keep pounding, and orders would keep coming. But in the stolen moments between it all, I knew I'd find him. And he'd find me. Because the truth was out now. And once spoken, there was no taking it back. If there's one thing I learned, it's that courage doesn't always come from marching into fire or following orders. Sometimes, it's about facing the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to admit, and daring to reach for what you truly want. So I ask you, what are you still pretending not to feel? What would change in your life if you finally stopped hiding? Backhand index pointing right. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story, just like mine, deserves to be heard.